Federal agents, open this door right now. We have a detention order for somebody on this bus.
I need to see a signed judicial warrant before anyone gets on this bus.
I don't need a warrant. This is federal enforcement. Open the door.
6 children are behind me. Show me the warrant.
You're really going to sit here and play hero for some illegal kid? Seriously?
Warrant?
Move your hand away from
ICE agents in black tactical vests surrounded a school bus at a gas station off Interstate 35 just south of Austin, demanding entry to detain a child on board. The driver refused to open the doors. What followed was 6 minutes of threats, a fist through glass, and a federal prosecution that ended with a revelation no one in that courtroom saw coming. The megaphone cut through the afternoon highway noise without warning. Federal agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Open this door immediately. 5. Intelligence confirms an undocumented minor is aboard this vehicle and a lawful detention order is in effect. The intercom on the driver's panel crackled to life, steady, unhurried, unmoved. A signed judicial warrant would be required before any armed personnel boarded the bus. 46 children were on board. The agent on the other side of the glass did not consider that an acceptable answer. This was not a warrant situation, he boomed. The intercom answered again. 46 children. Show the warrant. The threats escalated: felony obstruction, immediate arrest, prison. The driver's hand rested near the master lock and did not move. The doors stayed shut. Then the fist came through the glass. If you are ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let's continue. The Shell station off Interstate 35 was the kind of place that exists in the background of lives, a functional pause between one destination and the next, unremarkable by design. Diesel pumps running, a line at the register, the low rumble of 18-wheelers on the access road, a digital price sign flickering in the afternoon glare. On any other Thursday it would have been forgotten by nightfall. At 2:17 p.m., on this particular Thursday, that changed permanently. 2 black SUVs came in from the north side of the lot. 2 more cut hard from the south. They moved in tight, practice formation, bracketing the yellow school bus at the fuel island with a precision that left no room for misreading intent. Road flares hit the concrete before the vehicles had fully stopped, orange smoke curling against the pale Texas sky, sealing the perimeter as efficiently as any barricade. Agents in tactical vests poured onto the asphalt, hands near holsters, postures locked into the particular readiness of people who have rehearsed this sequence enough times that it has become physical memory. Inside the bus, 46 elementary students sat in various states of bewilderment, their earlier excitement about the Texas Science Museum dissolving into something quieter and more uncertain, the shift in atmosphere arriving before any of them could name its source. Mr. Williams had been pumping diesel when the SUVs came in. He registered them the way a man registers anything after 15 years of managing the unexpected calmly, completely, without the luxury of denial. 15 years on the same routes had given him a particular stillness, the practiced calm of a man who understood that panic was a contagion and that he was the one person on that bus who could not afford to catch it. He capped the fuel line, climbed back behind the wheel, and assessed what was arranged in front of him with the measured attention of someone whose decisions had always carried the weight of children's lives. The agent who approached the driver's door was broad-shouldered and deliberate in his stride, Agent Brady, 12 years with ICE. Carrying the bearing of a man for whom compliance was the expected outcome of authority rather than something that needed to be earned, brought the megaphone up to a distance where it was entirely unnecessary. The amplified voice rolled across the fuel island and bounced off the surrounding vehicles. Federal agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, immediate entry required. A lawful detention order was in effect for a passenger on this vehicle. The driver was to open the door without delay. Mr. Williams pressed the intercom. The response he gave was not a refusal, exactly. It was a requirement, procedural, specific, and delivered without a tremor. A signed judicial warrant would need to be presented before any armed personnel came aboard. There were 46 children in his care, and that fact was not incidental to the conversation. It was the entire conversation. Agent Brady's posture changed in a way that was visible to everyone with a phone already raised. The professionalism compressed into something tighter as he relayed that this was not a warrant situation, that immigration enforcement operated under different legal authority, and that the man behind that wheel was seconds away from a felony obstruction charge that would end his career and his freedom simultaneously. Other agents began moving around the perimeter, methodical at first, then progressively less so, fists hitting the rear emergency door, palms flat against the side windows. voices layering over one another until the noise became a physical presence pressing in from every direction at once. Inside, the children felt it before they understood it. 46 small bodies went still in the particular way that children go still when adult energy shifts into something they cannot interpret but instinctively recognize as dangerous. Backpacks sat unopened in laps. A boy in the 5th row pressed his face toward the window and pulled back from what he saw. Voices began to rise thin and high, searching for reassurance from a source that had not yet spoken loudly enough to reach them through the noise outside. Mr. Williams did not move from his seat. His hand stayed near the master lock. His voice through the intercom did not waver, did not accelerate, did not betray the arithmetic he was running silently. 46 children, 0 warrants, 1 lock between them, and whatever came next. The same answer, again and again, in different configurations of the same calm refusal, produced the warrant, and the conversation could continue. Without it, no one was boarding this bus. His only obligation, stated and restated as though it were a compass bearing he was reading aloud to keep himself oriented, was returning every child in his care to their family. 6 minutes passed that way. The bystanders who had been filling tanks and buying coffee had long since stopped what they were doing, some frozen where they stood, others backing toward the perimeter of the lot, nearly all of them recording. Chaperones inside the bus were on their phones, voices low and urgent. Parents began arriving within minutes, pulling in with hazards blinking, stepping out onto the asphalt, not knowing precisely what they were walking into but having absorbed enough from a brief, fractured phone call to know it was serious enough to leave work immediately. Agent Brady's composure had been degrading in increments that were legible to everyone recording from the lot. The measured authority of the first approach had given way to something raw, jaw-tight, color rising steadily in his face, each exchange through the intercom adding another layer of pressure to whatever was building behind his eyes. 12 years in federal law enforcement had not prepared him for the particular experience of being refused, calmly and repeatedly, by a man in a work shirt who showed no sign of breaking. On the 6th minute, the pressure found its exit. He drew his arm back and drove his fist through the driver's side window. The glass had carried a hairline fracture along the lower corner logged by maintenance, not yet scheduled for repair. It did not slow the impact. The window shattered inward in a single explosive burst, and the follow-through of Agent Brady's fist connected with Mr. Williams' jaw with enough force to snap his head hard to the side. Blood crossed the steering wheel in a bright, immediate line. It reached the dashboard. It reached the door panel. It was visible to every phone in the lot and to every child in the rows behind the driver's seat. 46 children screamed. The sound that came out of that bus was not a single voice. It was a wave, collective, primal, the released terror of 4 dozen small people who had spent 6 minutes holding themselves together through something they did not understand and were now holding together nothing at all. It rolled out through the broken window and across the fuel island and into every recording simultaneously, and it would become, within hours, the sound most closely associated with the incident, more than the megaphone, more than the threats, more even than the crack of the glass itself. Local police sirens were already audible on the access road. They arrived too late for the window and too late for the jaw. They found Mr. Williams being pulled from the bus in restraints, blood dripping steadily from his chin onto the collar of his work shirt, his expression holding the same quality of steadiness it had maintained through the entire 6-minute confrontation. He did not resist. Every second of what had happened was already stored on dozens of devices uploading to every platform simultaneously. The boy from the 5th row was removed separately, crying, hands reaching back toward a door that would not open for him, and escorted across the asphalt to a waiting federal vehicle, while parents who had just arrived stood at the edge of the lot, unsure whether they were permitted to intervene and understanding, with a particular helplessness, that they were not. The bus sat empty at the pumps. The flares burned down to their casings. By the time the lot began to clear, the first clips were past 1 million views. By nightfall the number would be beyond tracking, and the sound of 46 children screaming would be playing on loop in living rooms across the country. The federal courthouse in Austin had not seen a gallery this full in years. Camera crews staked out positions on the marble steps before dawn. Parents from 3 elementary schools formed a line that stretched half a block, many of them wearing matching white shirts. They filed into the gallery with the gravity of people who understood they were present for something consequential and intended to be counted among those who showed up. Mr. Williams sat at the defense table in the same faded blue work shirt he wore every morning on Route 17. The bruising along his jaw had moved through its full spectrum in the weeks since the gas station and settled into a persistent discoloration that the courtroom lighting did nothing to soften. His hands rested flat on the table. His posture carried no performance of either defiance or submission. He simply sat, as he had always sat, waiting for what came next with the patience of a man who had spent 15 years keeping a schedule that began before sunrise. The charges were read in under 3 minutes: obstruction of federal officers, interference with lawful detention, felony endangerment. Each count arrived with its potential sentence attached, and the cumulative weight of those numbers settled over the gallery like something with physical mass. The prosecution opened without theatrics. They played the footage. The courtroom heard the megaphone, the intercom, the escalating threats, and then the sound that no editing could prepare a room for, the crack of the window, the impact that followed it, and beneath both, rising and filling every corner of the room's acoustics, the screaming of 46 children. Several people in the gallery closed their eyes. The footage ran without interruption. Agent Brady took the stand in full dress uniform, his bearing calibrated for credibility. His account framed the stop as routine, the refusal as the catalyst, his own actions as proportionate responses to an escalating obstruction of federal authority. He used careful language. He reached consistently for the passive voice when proximity to the fist became unavoidable. The public defender, Mr. Lawson, had spent the intervening weeks building a cross-examination that required neither volume nor dramatics, only precision. He took Agent Brady through the morning's events in granular sequence, pausing at each critical point to ask one specific question. Was a judicial warrant in the agent's possession at any point during the stop? Pro-grained. No. Had Mr. Williams made any physical threatening gesture toward any federal officer? No. Had the driver drawn or referenced any weapon during the 6-minute exchange? No. The answer Brady offered when asked whether the children had posed a threat that the driver had been shielding a federal subject was not the question that had been asked, and everyone in the room registered the gap. Defense witnesses built their case through accumulation rather than argument. A mother described her daughter's sleep since the incident, the waking, the crying, the refusal to board any bus, the nightmares about men with vests at a gas station that the child still lacked the vocabulary to fully articulate. The school principal read from Mr. Williams' employment record with the neutral authority of documented fact: 15 years, 0 incidents. Performance evaluations that reached for words like dependable and present in ways that clearly meant something beyond the job description. Then the parents came one after another, each one adding to a portrait that had been assembled in plain sight for a decade and a half without anyone stepping back far enough to see it whole. The blankets kept folded at the back of the bus for children who arrived underdressed. The lunches quietly covered when an account came up short. The afternoon he drove a feverish 7-year-old to the emergency room when no parent could be reached, waited alone in the plastic chair until someone arrived, and returned the next morning without mentioning it. Story after story, unremarkable in individual scale and devastating in collective weight. If this is stirring something in you, type hero in the comments and share it with one parent or teacher who needs to hear it today. Judge Harlan delivered his ruling with the methodical specificity of a man who had chosen each word deliberately. The recklessness of deploying that level of tactical force in a confined commercial space occupied by children. The complete absence of the judicial authorization the driver had correctly and repeatedly demanded. The violence that had resulted from a federal agent's failure to maintain professional restraint when met with lawful resistance. All charges against Mr. Williams were dismissed with prejudice. A full internal review of Agent Brady's conduct was entered into the record. The gallery responded before the gavel came down. In the noise that followed, Mr. Williams stood. He did not turn toward the crowd or raise his hands. He reached into the inside pocket of his work shirt and removed something small, folded, and clearly very old, a newspaper clipping with edges worn soft from years of handling. The paper yellowed to the color of old bone. He carried it to the judge's bench and placed it down without a word. Judge Harlan unfolded it slowly. The courtroom quieted in sections as people closest to the bench noticed his expression beginning to change. The headline was legible from the front rows: Local Hero Saves 14 Children from Gas Station Inferno. The photograph beneath it showed a younger man, face darkened with soot, shirt burned at one shoulder, carrying a small, terrified boy through a wall of smoke. The station behind them was identifiable by its signage, its pump configuration, its exact position relative to the interstate access road. It was the same Shell station off I-35. Judge Harlan's hands went very still. Recognition does not always arrive with ceremony. Sometimes it moves across a face in complete silence, a private collision between a present moment and a buried one, too sudden and too total for any managed response. The controlled authority Judge Harlan had maintained through 3 weeks of testimony dissolved in the space of a few seconds, replaced by something unguarded and entirely human. He had been 10 years old. The fire had moved faster than anyone expected, cutting off the rear exit, and there had been a moment he would carry the rest of his life. Smoke becoming a ceiling, pressing down. Heat becoming a sound as much as a sensation, the particular terror of a child who understands that no one is coming, and then there had been arms. Strong and certain, belonging to someone who did not slow at the threshold of the smoke but moved through it toward the danger without hesitation, and lifted him and carried him out into the open air. He had never learned the name of that man. The chaos of the aftermath had swallowed the particulars, the ambulances, the parents, the smoke still rising from the pumps. He had spent 25 years carrying the general shape of a debt that had no address. The man standing before him in a faded blue work shirt was the same man in the photograph. What followed was not the polished applause of a formal occasion. It was the sound of a room full of people who had just witnessed the closing of a circle so complete that it felt almost too deliberate to have been accidental, the particular, rare silence before a wave breaks. And then the wave itself. People stood on chairs. Court officers who had spent entire careers maintaining composure in this room made no attempt to maintain it. The sound moved through the building and out the main doors and down the marble steps, and the crowd watching on a live stream outside picked it up and carried it into the open air above Congress Avenue. By the time Mr. Williams reached his car, the combined view count had crossed 200 million. 3 weeks later he stood in the East Room of the White House in the same blue work shirt. He shook the president's hand, accepted the Presidential Citizen's Medal with the same brief nod he gave children who thanked him for waiting those extra 2 minutes, and offered a statement short enough to fit on half a note card thanking the families of Route 17, acknowledging the children who had been in his care that afternoon at the fuel island, and nothing more. He was back in Austin before the evening news cycle completed its first rotation. Monday morning arrived at 5:30 the way it always did. Pre-trip inspection, same sequence, same attention. The difference was the other drivers, the ones who had called him the ghost for years, not unkindly, but accurately. That morning they were waiting. No formal line, just one hand extending and then another until the gesture had moved through the group and settled back into the ordinary sounds of the depot starting its day. Parents stood at curbs with thermoses and handwritten cards. The children boarded more slowly, making eye contact, saying good morning without being prompted. A girl in the second grade handed him a folded piece of drawing paper, a yellow school bus in crayon with a red cape flowing from its rear bumper and a figure at the wheel in a blue shirt. The boy from the 5th row was last. He stopped at the top of the steps and said what he needed to say, quietly and without theater, and then moved to his seat. The route carried them past the Shell station. Mr. Williams slowed for the light at the access road, as he had slowed for it thousands of times, and the familiar configuration of pumps and concrete passed through the driver's side window at the speed of an ordinary morning. Inside the bus, most of the children did not look up. They were already deep in the conversations that mattered to them: weekend plans, a dispute about a game, a song someone had heard, the station receded in the side mirror. There were things about those 15 years that no testimony had reached. The seating chart rearranged 3 times in a single week because he had noticed a particular cruelty forming in the back rows and dismantled it without ever naming it aloud. The call to a school counselor that became, 6 weeks later, a case file and a child removed from a home that was not safe. The hundreds of mornings he had been the first consistent adult presence in a child's day, arriving at the curb before school began, present and reliable, asking nothing in return. None of it had been visible, because visibility had never been the point. At the end of the route, with the afternoon light long across the depot yard, Mr. Williams locked the bus, pocketed the key, and walked toward the depot entrance without looking back. He had never needed to. The route would be there in the morning, same streets, same stops, same children at the same curbs with their backpacks and their ordinary, irreplaceable mornings. The world had finally looked up. He had not changed to meet its gaze. He had simply continued, and that, in the end, was the whole of the story.
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn